All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending. First off, I'll call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of the Anchorage Enterprise and Utility Oversight Committee of the Whole. We're scheduled for September 21st today from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., although hopefully we will not need that entire time. First off, let's do introductions, starting with the Assembly members. Mr. Cross.
Kevin Cross.
Karen Bronga.
Scott Myers.
Anna Brawley.
And Member Johnson. On the phone we have Thank you. And then to my right from the administration.
Good morning, Kent Colhayes, Municipal Manager.
Alden Thurn, CFO.
All right, thank you, everybody. First, under item 3, unfinished business, continued discussion of the Port of Alaska Plan of Finance, and I believe Mr. Thurn is going to speak on that matter.
Yeah, I just want to give an update. I'd like to, when assembly memos are coming forward, to just kind of give you a heads up and so forth. We are, I think everyone is hopefully aware, we did receive our first positive initial comments back with regards to the TIFIA loan, that our letter of interest is good, and now we can start really beginning that process to really dive into it. But one of the components of being able to do that is we have to go out and actually get our own separate bond rating for the TIFIA loan. So the port has a bond rating, but the port has to have a TIFIA loan bond rating. So we are putting together for the assembly review and hopefully approval here in the near future a request to spend, I think it was approximately $50,000. I think we want to go out and use S&P again to be able to do this going forward. It is a requirement of the process. So I want to take the opportunity to let you know when you see that, that's what's coming forward. So they can't just use the port's bond rating agency bond rating, which I believe is an A. They have to have one specifically done by a rating agency. We thought it'd be more efficient and more economical to use the one we currently have. There's only a couple, Fitch, Moody's, S&P, that kind of thing. So when you see that coming forward, it's specifically related to our application ultimately for the TIFIA loan, and we need to spend this money to ask the rating agency to begin that work so we can have that rating as a part of our process.
Thank you. Real quick, I'd just like the record to reflect we've been joined by Member Constant and Member Brawley. You had a question?
Yeah, thank you. I was just curious. I know interest rates have gone up, and it looks like they're going to be there for a while. Maybe you could just describe how the TIFIA loan does or doesn't interact with kind of the general finance. We know that it's expensive to borrow right now, so I'm just curious how that's different.
Sure. Through the chair, Member Raleigh, that's an area I'll have to do a little bit more research on, because I know we're at least a year away from that happening, and a lot of things can happen. What I have been made aware of, that it is cheaper no matter what than to borrow, regardless of what the rates are at that time. My assumption would be they go up and down based upon the rates and are accordingly. But I am aware that those rates are better, but I don't know how they're tied to what's currently going on.
And just to clarify too, I think it's a great idea that we're going after that TIFIA loan, and I know there's been work on that already, but just it's regardless of what it costs, we should.
We're like through the first hurdle of a long distance hurdle race, but it's always positive to get those kind of things. But I did want to make you aware. I think we're shooting for the 10th on that, so you might see that one coming up. But I want to take the opportunity to let you know what's coming and why it's there and what we're trying to accomplish, and that we have to do it. And then lastly, I'll make one other comment here. We are working obviously on a plan of finance, which is a big effort for quite some time, and it'll take many months and years to be able to do this. A couple of the critical things that we're looking for is in November, we're hoping to get back the percentage, the 65% design thing. So there's some important numbers there that are finalizing, but we are I'm trying to take this as an opportunity to give you an advance look. Ultimately we have to let a contract for $600 million, give or take, whatever it actually happens. We only have a couple $100 million at this point in SAP. So we will be coming at some point for an authorization by the assembly for maybe $400 million in revenue bonds. Now, being authorized and actually spending that money or going out to do that. We have pretty much promised Assemblymember Zalatel and several of you that we will always bring it back. Any revenue bond will go with regards to port will go back in front of you on an ongoing basis in the future. But an authorization of $400 million is a big number. So I'm going to probably try to do something similar to what I did probably in December with you when we did the surcharge tariff thing. I'll bring you in and kind of, we have a document we're preparing and it kind of outlines all of these kind of things. But ultimately, there might be an assembly memo in the first part of the year that asks for authorization so that we can meet the purchasing requirement to have that amount encumbered, so to speak, even though we're not intending to go out there, but you have to authorize it in order to get into SAP. So I'm just I want to start prepping that conversation because 400 million is a big number, and I want to wait until the November because maybe it's only 350 million because the cost went down, or maybe we get 100 million in a grant that we might get notified in November. There's another one out there at that point in time, so that number is going to be flexible, and I want to give the number to be as low as possible so that you're not, but if we don't get those things, we do have to ultimately have a $600 million in SAP number, and that will require that. So I just want to start prepping you because that's a big number, and I don't want people freaking out about it, but I will intend on bringing you in December and January so that we can, if we're going to let the contract out in March, we've got to have all that stuff done in ahead of time so that when we put out the RFP, we've got that money in SAP as an authorization. So I wanted to start taking the time today and just start letting you know what my thought process is. I thought it worked very well when we brought you in for the surcharge tariff one, and I'll do a very similar type thing where we'll spend some time with you individually or as a small group to start walking you through why we will have to do this. And but I figured that would, November, we have a couple of really critical good number finalizations. I don't want to kind of wait to that point, and then we'll start in December, January so that we can be done and ready when we want to let the contract out towards the end of March. So that's just kind of a heads up, but I wanted to take this opportunity to always prep you for what's coming.
Yeah, thank you. And then let the record show that we've been joined by Mr. Martinez on the phone. And did you have a question? Chair? And then after that, member Bro.
Yeah, maybe a question or comment. I know that the TIFIA loan rates are set at the rate of the Treasury. I'm not sure if that's a daily rate or the 1 year, but it'll be interesting to understand what that is because it's definitely the cheapest money we can get. And then also for members and to the acting CFO for now, I want to make sure if we do authorize revenue bonds to the scale of 400,000, similar to what we discussed before, it's not just presentation to the assembly, but triggers for approval for additional work by the assembly. So it's not just a $400,000 blank check with the promise that we'll tell you about it, but actual triggers of approval of something.
And as I mentioned and so forth, I know I promised Meg and probably several other of you, as we actually need to sell revenue bonds, we've actually put into our process that because remember that the surcharge tariff has to be adjusted at the same time we're doing that. That would be prior to the actual sale of the bonds, you will see the bond sale coming forward for your approval, and as well as the tariff surcharge increase at that same meeting. And we'll try to do it 2 to 3 weeks before the actual sale. But I have committed that the actual selling of normally authorization, once you give authorization, then we're off and running and we can do it. But with regards to the port, the way we've set up the process, we will follow a process that we committed to. That also allows the Port Commission to be involved prior to this happening. But every revenue bond that we have to sell with the port in the future will follow that process, so that while you may be authorizing it, you will be approving the actual sale each time we have to do that, which, as you remember, is our last alternative funding source kind of a thing.
Thank you. And member Brawley?
Yeah, thank you. And this is also in the spirit of giving a heads up and making sure that we're coordinating. So this also relates to a later item on the agenda, the legislative priorities. So I'll come back to that for this committee's purpose. But just to say, we are working on our legislative program collaboratively with the administration. We know the port is going to be a huge priority. Part of the goal is to tell the story, to say, thank you to the legislature for your 200 million investment. And then really giving updates on what we're doing. But to the extent that there may be an ask to the state legislature, or really just clarifying, what we're already working on, please just keep in touch on that level as well, because we want to make sure that we're coordinated and have the right story in Juneau, and we intend to work with the port as well.
Yeah, I believe we should thank the state legislator for the 200 million that we already have and given us, and also make our case for additional requests that we certainly need and can use.
And will be coming.
And just for our timeline as well, so we have to pass the legislative program by December 10th. We're aiming to do that in late November. And if we need to, then just this is December 5th regular meeting. So I know that timing won't fully align with your, for figuring out all the financing, but to the extent that we do know if there is a request, that's the timeline we're working on.
Chair Constant.
Thanks. Since we have the port discussion on the table, I'm going to note for folks, the administration, the assembly, we created as a body the Design Advisory Board for the port, which is a smaller commission or committee that establishes a conversation with us about what the priorities are and for the modernization program. And it's made up of a certain set of folks, including members of industry and the administration. It is sunsetting, and we will be having a discussion on the future of the Design Advisory Board. It will very likely continue, but it also may have some changes to the composition and its structure. And so I just wanted folks to know and hear that now in advance of any proposal. We may have a short-term extension that just extends it as is for a time while we work on some substantive change to its structure, or we'll just get it all done. It depends on the workload of our council. And so I just want to put that in everyone's mind that there's a conversation coming about the Design Advisory Board relating to the future of the modernization program.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you for your time, Mr. Thurn. Next on the agenda, moving on to new business, we have item A, discussion RE snow dump site update. And on the agenda says Lance Wilbur will be speaking on it, but I believe we have Mr. Colhase instead.
To the chair, actually, we have Paul Van Lanningham and Shay Throop, both from maintenance and operations here. I'm here to provide support to them if needed. So,
thank you. Would you like to come up and join us up here? And please turn on the microphones and then introduce yourself, and you have the floor.
My name's Shay Troop. I'm the acting director of maintenance and operations.
Paul Van Lanningham, manager, MOA Street Maintenance.
and I think, Mr. Chair, I think that probably all three of us are a bit of a disadvantage because the agenda was developed probably in coordination with Lance, and he's out. So we can give you a general update. I'm not sure what the exact topic is, if it's snow dumps broadly, a specific snow dump site.
Well, to be honest, I'm not sure either, and I respect the fact that you guys are kind of deep on the spot. Maybe if you want to just give us a brief overview, and it
And I
sounds
can
like
speak to it.
there's
if you
some
don't mind.
questions.
Not so
Or-
much question. It's here we come. Winter is coming. Last winter, we had an emergency request to create snow dumps. I think really the topic is, are we prepared? What's coming and what's the plan? And so I don't think there was a specific snow dump site conversation.
I'll start, and then Paul can weigh in through the chair to member council. I think last year the ordinance for snow dumps was more with respect to the need for private snow dumps. I think the municipal snow dumps were generally functioning pretty well last year. They were getting full, but they were functioning. So I'm not aware of any plans right now to bring forward another emergency ordinance or short-term ordinance for private snow dumps.
Is that did you have a follow-up, Mr. Councilman?
No, that's then we'll hear a briefing in the general conversation, but I think she.
Member Braun?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I haven't tracked it closely. I know there's been work on development of a snow dump in West Anchorage. And I don't know, I can't remember if that's a municipal project or what the status of that is. And I don't know when it'll be online. I know it was moving through the process of approval at some point.
Through the chair to Member Brawley, I can provide some general information on that, and we can get more dates if you need them. For those members who don't know, we've been using a snow dump site in West Anchorage right next to the Northwood Street Maintenance Station that is located on airport property. And for a long time, we had a long-term lease, and the airport determined here in the past several years that that was not an entirely appropriate use of airport land due to the fact that they've received airport funding for the airport in general, and you can't use airport property that's been funded partially by airport funds, federal funding, for non-airport uses. We have been able to successfully negotiate, I think, a 1 year at a time lease extension. They've been very accommodating. But we are facing the reality that at some point we'll have to vacate that snow dump. So in order to address that, project management and engineering has gone through a very lengthy process working with the community councils and others, and identified a site just southeast of that site on the south side of the street maintenance building in the Connors Bog area, gone through all the permitting with the Corps of Engineers and others, and are in the design process for using that site. And I think I believe that we will see at least a portion of the funding for that new development on the 2024 bond. I would guess that full construction and implementation of that site is 2 years out at least, but we're pretty confident that we can continue using the airport site for now.
Anyone else? No? All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Moving along, next.
Wait,
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was hoping we would just have a briefing on preparations for our snow season that's coming, just so we hear a little bit on that. I don't want to let you off the hook without a report. So here, please let us know where we stand.
Through the chair, Mr. Constant. Yes, last year we stumbled a little bit. We have spent all year learning from some of our mistakes, putting things in place to prevent those from happening. We are getting ready. You will see 3 non-encumbering contracts coming your way for additional side dump trucking, additional graders to help out during plowouts, and additional manpower and equipment to work on sidewalks during plowouts. That will be coming your way pretty soon. Other than that, we continue to interview employees or hopeful new employees every day. We've hired 8 this year. We're still breaking even through attrition. Right now, we're sitting at about 16 vacancies with another 8 seasonals. I'm confident our seasonals will come into play here in the next week or couple of weeks with the construction season ending out there in the private sector. We have a number of returners that come back every year, so we should be sitting pretty good there. We have spent all summer talking about some of the things that we did good last year and some of the things that we did bad in preparation for this coming season. We've met with the Downtown Partnership and Easy Park as recently as this week to discuss better communication on working down here in the CBD, Central Business District, and along with other coordination with DOT, State of Alaska, on some things that we're going to work together on and do better. So I have all the confidence in the world in my folks and in support from the administration that this winter will be a lot better than last year.
No, I just would say, so I hate to give up my secrets of success to the other members, but one of the secrets of success is to keep good relationship with Paul, because most of your constituent concerns that are really the work of the assembly, which is sidewalks and sewers and roads, and runs through his office. And so Paul has been really one of the secrets to my success. I recommend you all figure out a way to relate to him. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And go ahead, Mr. Collis.
I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to follow on what Paul was saying. I know some other things Paul's been doing is some preseason training with some of the newer operators who have not. I mean, it's quite a bit different to run a grader on a road construction job than it is to run a grader plowing snow. I've done a little of both. So Paul's got a plan in place to train folks ahead of the snowfall, so that'll be good. It'll hopefully help with both efficiency and minimize damage to equipment. Paul mentioned that he's working with the downtown business owners and others. That's an ongoing issue. Street maintenance will come through, remove snow, and business owners, with the best of intentions, will place snow where Paul's crews have just removed it. So we're working to eliminate that lack of coordination. Another thing we're going to be working on with our comms team is getting out some good public information to the public at large, letting them know that it's frankly illegal to push snow from your driveway into the street. And we know it happens. Where it's really bad is when people put all their snow in a cul-de-sac and then the residents can't get around the cul-de-sac, or when they push snow into the street after Paul's folks have plowed. So we're going to do some outreach on that. Also do some outreach on really what to expect when a grader comes through and there's 14 inches of snow on the ground and you've got a small berm in your driveway, or they leave some snow by your mailbox. Paul's folks want to go back and clean up every one of those, but frankly, that impacts their ability to complete the plow out in 84 hours. So we're going to try to help educate the public, give them some good information, update the website with the plow plan, and provide some contact info for the public to call in. So.
All right, I have Chair Constant, and then I put myself in the queue.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to reiterate, I've talked about it last year and maybe the year before. It was probably easier with Nixle. We really need to figure out a way to send out text alerts to neighborhoods when we're about to come through. We have to be able to do that. The technology exists. We have the list. We know where we're going to be. And so Nixle, we don't have anymore. So I don't know that Rave is really going to work, because I think that's really police focused. But if we can come up with a notification system where the plow team, the beginning of the day or the night before, sends out a simple broadcast message to everyone you have contacts for that says, in the next 24 hours or 12 hours, we will be in your neighborhood, then probably we will save time and money, because we'll get cars off the roads and actually have an efficient plow out. And so, because in the old days, it used to be, especially when there was a major clearing, that you would go through and set up signage the day before, actual manual signs tapped into the neighborhood. Well, we don't have to do that anymore. I just don't know how to help us get there. And so if we can do that, figure out the cost, whatever it might be, we'll save the money on the back end if we can send out like a text-based notification, your neighborhood is next.
Through the chair, I think Paul may have some ideas on that, and we'll look into it.
Yeah, I think I had myself in the queue, and then I'll go to Member Cross. I just wanted to follow quickly on something that you mentioned, Paul. And I think you spoke to that we a plan to bring additional capacity and with side dumps and graders. Is that correct? Are we talking about private contractors there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then I guess my follow-up to that would be, I understand that you guys still have, sounds like around 16 vacancies. And I know that you are certainly not unique in the city with having challenges finding, enough people to fill these roles, especially since these are, people with particular skills and qualifications. I guess my question would be is if we were fully staffed, would we still have the same need that we anticipate to bring in private contractors? And I'm just thinking this from a sort of cost perspective, because I know last year was extraordinary in some regards, but we ended up spending a lot of money on contractors. And I think long-term, we'd like to find a way to be more efficient with how we deploy our funds. And so I'd just be curious if you could talk about how those two things affect each other, the need for the contractors and our current state of employment.
Yes, as Anchorage continues to grow and we continue to put emphasis on sidewalks, pedestrian facilities and things like that, I think we're always going to see the need for additional contracting out for hauling of snow. My folks fully staffed, although street maintenance does own 14 end dumps, that's not nearly enough to do what we ask our contractors to do. So I think no matter what we do as a city, we are going to continue to need the resources of contractors coming in and hauling snow. Again, I want to remind you, the side dump contract that we put out is a non-encumbering to use on an as-needed basis, or it was a stopgap for something that we may need that we ran into last year. We didn't want to repeat itself. So it is a non-encumbering contract that if we need to use it, we'll have it there, but our plan is not to utilize it completely as we do our other contractor that we're using now. And to continue, as we continue to look at pedestrian facilities, sidewalks and things like that, most of that snow removal is going to be a form of hauling the snow off. So instead of utilizing less means in hauling it off, we will, as we move forward, we will probably continue and need more resources to haul the snow off in forms of trucking contracts in the future.
Yeah, thank you. Member Cross.
Yeah, I just want to build off what Constance was saying earlier. We had, I don't know if that was a formal discussion, but we had in conversations during the height of the snow pandemic last winter was how do we better communicate to the public regarding the efforts that are going on where the vehicles are en route and where our equipment is en route? Because one of the things is, that perception that you're not doing enough or whatever it is, but they don't see all the work that goes into it, or they just, hey, it looks like that's the third time they've plowed that road in this time. And meanwhile, and there's a lot of misconceptions. And so looking for an effective way to communicate to the public, we had discussed this last year, which was if most of the vehicles have GPS on them, it would just be a map or something where people could just see where they were and where they were in that queue or the process. Because there's, I guess what I discovered is as I was dealing with a lot of phone calls, and although this doesn't deal with you directly, this has to do with Subursa and had to do with a different contract. And I would call and say, hey, this individual is saying has been plowed. They would go back and it would take someone's time and resources to go, no, actually we were just there 48 hours ago. And that's not accurate. And so, but I felt bad for that individual that's having to respond to these concerns or these misconceptions, and so how do we more effectively communicate? And I was just thinking like a GIS map or something. I own one of my businesses has a delivery and I know where all our delivery trucks, I'm sure you know where your vehicles are. And I can just put in an address and it reroutes the individual who's most efficiently there to put it in there. But if that's something we would want to share with the public so they could see where at in the course their house or their property is and where it's going to happen, just so that we're taking less burden off emergency phone calls or these, because that's just more labor and more cost effort on our part. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Mr. Cross, we currently do not have GPS transmitters in our street maintenance equipment. I think we probably only have them in APD and maybe fire department vehicles. So it is something that is potentially in the works, but there's a long discussion about that with the the bargaining units and others. We do have the GIS website, which I think folks who visited it last year found it to be very informational, and Paul's folks did a very good job of keeping it updated. I think publicizing that website more, using social media more, and then, as Mr. Constance said, finding a way to have a real-time alert system, whether it's through Rave or something else, would be a good tool.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm just going to say thank you in advance because here it comes.
Yes. Good luck, gentlemen.
If I may,
yes.
everybody knows the street maintenance folks do a great job. I think the unsung heroes from last year and from every year are the dispatchers who answer the phone and send things out. If we were to play some of the phone calls that those dispatchers receive, it would be a series of beeps. I mean, you couldn't play it in a public setting. So they do a stellar job under very difficult circumstances. Just a plug for them as well. Thank you.
Something we have in common.
All right. All right. Thank you, everybody. All right. Moving on to item 4B. We have amendment number 3 to contract with Roger Hickle Contracting to provide general contracting services for capital improvement projects for the MOA Merrill Field Airport.
Good morning. I'm Rich Sewell, Merrifield Airport Manager, and with me today is Eric Jort, engineer from HDL Engineering. He's the project manager for all of our building projects. And just as an introduction, this is, I think, the third time that I've been here at the Assembly's request, following up so that each step through these projects funded by CARES, that the Assembly knows each project along the way. This project, under the Roger Hickle contracting project, is focused on 1568 Orca Street, which is a building that we own and lease to the U.S. Geological Survey. And just last Friday, our architect, Steve Fishback, came to terms with Hickle Contracting on the not to exceed price on this project. Chair?
Thank you. Anything else to speak on this as a matter of introduction, or are we ready for questions?
Well, I guess just one kind of top level comment is the existing projects that were previously approved are moving apace. We're just about ready to finish up on 800 Merrifield Drive, which is the manager's office. And we finished up the roof replacement just in time after they peeled it up. It was at imminent failure. So we made it, and that's going to be buttoned up here soon. The other project that's in the queue is 1025 Orca Street, and that's progressing apace. Then the other building package of projects is at the Merrifield Airport, has 3 pilot shacks for flight planning, and those are being worked on as we speak. So that's kind of the top level where we're at.
Thank you. Were you raising your hand, Mr. Gold? Okay. I think I saw Member Brawley and then go to Mr. Constant.
Yeah, I just wondered, so I remember a prior presentation, you talked about the deadline, the federal deadline for funding. I just wondered if there was an update, because I know you were making the case to try to get that extended, or at least changing from maybe completion to encumbrance, or whatever that needs to look like.
Yeah, well, I have had, as FAA administrator here in Alaska, frank and meaningful conversations with FAA airports. Christy Warden at FAA Airports, she's basically the lead dog for this grant, and she has given me personal assurances that the grant will be extended. Our CODEL has been on them in a very, very aggressive way. Yay, Senator Murkowski. But they're not willing to put it into writing yet. They want to wait to basically April. So, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. So.
Thank you. I have Mr. Constant and then myself.
Thank you. So, as is almost always the case, Congress figures out a way to extend these deadlines. And we sacrificed neighborhood projects, neighborhood priorities for a deadline. That is no longer a deadline. That's intriguing, something I'll chew on. You mentioned that there's finally an agreement on the not to exceed price. We don't have the documents yet. We'll probably get them shortly. What is the not to exceed price that was agreed upon for that project?
It's $833,710.
Do we know what the initial design cost was? Like the proposal that went out for the design?
Yeah, could you please?
Through the chair, Mr. Constant, the design proposal that was put together for this package consisted of 11 different buildings to be participated in. So to speak to the exact cost for that particular building, I don't think we have that off the top of our hand.
Do you remember what the total was? for design? The initial authorization before amendments?
I don't have it in
That's
front of me.
okay. I can make my point without it. This one is unusual in that it's not really that big of a number, the 833, 710, but we have an experience with these CMGC contracts that we are going from a tiny little authorized award to a massive contract without real due process. And so I just wanted to let folks know that there is an ordinance coming relating to the CMGC method of contracting that's going to establish a requirement for public hearing when the change from design goes from a small number, say $50,000 or less, to millions of dollars without the public having an opportunity to see inside of the engine. And so I'm just letting folks know that use the CMGC while you have it as it is, because it is soon changing.
Yeah, thank you. And then I have a question, but I guess just to share some additional concerns with the CMGC process. And this relates to not this current amendment that we're looking at, but a prior one. I noticed going back through the notes that I think the original estimate or the original value for the project was put forward as something like $900,000 by the contractor. And the third party estimator came back, I think almost like half that. I mean, it was a massive variance between what they thought the project should cost and what the contractor was asking for. And ultimately, it sounds like that discrepancy, which was to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, was mostly for overtime, which I would imagine that if it was done through an invitation to bid, like we would not expect to have hundreds of thousands of dollars added to a project cost estimate, because that would probably not be the lowest responsive bid. But because really essentially our hands were tied, I think ultimately we authorized that additional spending, which I think once it was settled was like $160,000. So $160,000 to pay for overtime that, had there been somebody else actually performing the work, I don't think would have anticipated to be a cost. So that is just another reason why this CMGC process feels problematic. I guess with this, more specifically with Amendment 3, it looks like we are getting close to the total grant amount of 6.8 million. Are we anticipating another amendment for additional work, or is this kind of the last one we're going to see?
Chair Johnson, originally the grant was a total of, I believe, 17.8 or $17.9 million from for the CARES grant to Merrill Field. And so Merrill Field has used a big chunk of that money replacing all of our rolling stock, the graders and loaders and everything else. And then there was also, of course, a change to, or rather to include building development, rehab and everything. And so it's been used in various different ways, salaries. And so anyway, I guess I'm a little bit fuzzy about what part of that or what you're asking.
I guess my question would be, I understand that grant to a number of different projects, and I see a certain amount here that I think we're putting towards complete repair and maintenance items on up to 11 buildings. Is that piece of it? Is this the last item we're going to see in terms of this 6.8 million, or is there another? Do we expect another proposal will come forward for additional work to buildings?
I see. Okay, thanks. We are right now in the process of thinking about how we can address the problems and deficiencies at the airport equipment building, where the shop where our guys store equipment and do really all the airfield maintenance guys work out of. There's some significant problems there. And so we're just looking at what and how we can address those problems given the time frame. So I think what we're thinking about is doing the engineering design work next and having that in our hip pocket so that when the deadline, the grant deadline comes, if it's extended, then yay us. If it's not, then we would still be able to be reimbursed for that part of the project. And then subsequently, there's other funding sources like the bilateral infrastructure law and other AIP funding sources But I think that the maintenance shop work will be the last, I think it would be the last part of this package.
Okay, thank you. I have a quick follow-up and then go to Mr. Constant. So, originally we were looking at, I think, trying to fix or repair up to 11 MRI-owned buildings. How close are we going to get at the end of this? I mean, are we actually going to take care of all 11, or what's the total count and what's the delta?
Through the chair, I think the answer there would be approximately 8 of the 11 buildings. I would like to note that just due to the amount of the limited budget we did have, we are addressing the life safety code violation issues that we can to the best we can with the money we have. I wish we had a bottomless end of money that we could fix every problem on every single building, but ultimately we're hopefully shooting for 8 of the 11. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then I believe Member Constant.
Thank you. I think your first question, Mr. Chair, was a good question to follow into a little bit. The question being, how are we in relationship to the plan in terms of achieving the previously stated goals? And so I'm not sure who at the airfield has the FISC, but I think it would be good to see a table of the first round of proposed expenditures, the first round of amended, and then every subsequent round of amended to the point where we see the expenditures where they actually landed. And so I think it would be helpful from a compliance perspective to understand the actual, I guess, budget to actual from the beginning to now.
Okay.
It's not like a super critical. I wouldn't want to do that in the place of getting construction done, but would want it as part of this conversation.
Got it.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, that's it. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, moving along, we are under item 5, committee legislative and budget priorities and other standing items. Is there anyone here to speak on the SWU update?
Yeah, I will briefly, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Just that the stormwater utility has been created, even though there's no investment or interest by this current administration. And so that item will remain until we get an administration willing to tackle the question of a stormwater utility implementation, because again, it's created.
Okay, thank you. Under B, we have legislative priorities for state legislative program. I believe Member Brawley was going to speak on that.
Yeah, just briefly, and I'll acknowledge we have another committee meeting, our legislative committee, in a couple hours or hour and a half. But just briefly to say, this is a request from the legislative committee to the enterprise and utility committee to really take the lead on drafting what the port ask needs to be to the legislature. And I know Vice Chair Zalatel is not here, but has been tracking that closely. So partly that's why I'm asking. But essentially, we want to distribute the work of crafting those priorities, knowing that other folks and other committees have been really closely tracking those topics. So another one, Housing and Homelessness Committee, that's a logical place to have recommendations come from. So to the extent that there are asks for the port, other major facilities, I know Merrifield has been in the legislative program in the past. Just again, making that request between now and in November to bring those to the legislative committee or communicate them so that we can make sure they go in the program, because we intend to collaborate and not just create those recommendations in a vacuum.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then finally, under item 5, we have budget items for 2024. Was there anyone looking to speak on that item? No, if not, it looks like we have some folks from Solid Waste Services here. Or was there anyone else open to speak at the meeting? I know we had initially talked about maybe doing a presentation from SWS, but it didn't get added to the agenda. So Not trying to put anyone on the spot, but we do have a little bit of time, or we can look further down the road.
There's a briefing, it should be.
Okay.
Yeah, only because the members of the committee, members of the assembly, members of the might want to know.
It's been pointed out, and forgive me for being new in this role, but it sounds like if we're actually going to have a briefing, it should have been something that's an agenda item. So I would guess at that point, we will move on to audience participation if the. Okay, if you want to speak briefly to kind of introduce the topic of conversation, but we may have to, if we're asking about a proper presentation, schedule that for later. Are you here for public comment? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an individual.
Okay, all right. Well, then let's just move on to item 6, audience participation, and please step up to a mic, introduce yourself, and then let us know what you're here to speak on.
I don't know how to use this so well.
Push the button and it should turn green.
And if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself and let us know what part of town you're here from.
There we go. So my name is John O'Hara, and I live over by Valley of the Moon Park. So that's, excuse me, 743 18th Avenue. And it's, my concern is regarding solid waste services. So I didn't know that there was a presentation coming up, but there's an assembly ordinance that affects me as a property owner. Excuse me. And I don't have the ordinance right now, but I can tell you that it requires trash service within a boundary. And so I have 2 properties. They're next door to each other. And I think it's been 4 years now that I've been working with them to try and, I guess, resolve my issue, which is they want me to pay for trash service that I'm not getting. And then they send me to collections if I don't pay. So again, it's been kind of, it's a small issue, but because it's been over 4 years for me working on this, and I think, Mr. Constant, I've sent you a letter on this before. So this was where I was recommended to go after I've kind of exhausted all of my other options. So.
Thank you. That's first I've heard of it, but if somebody feels like they're in a position to answer your question, Member Cross?
Yeah, I've run into this before, particularly in the downtown, like Mountain View area and stuff, where they require that you use a specific servicer for trash service. And but you're saying, so you own 2 adjacent properties that are next door. And so are you getting trash service at one, so it doesn't make sense to have trash at the other?
Correct.
Okay. And so, and they don't have, what I hear you're saying is they don't have a policy, or they don't have a procedure where you can go and say, I have 2 properties that are adjacent. I should be able to just use one receptacle for both of them because I'm the same property owner. They don't have a way for you to apply for a variance, or?
Okay. I think that's probably the most surprising thing for me with this, because for sure I'm not the only individual that would be affected by this. And in fact, I've ran into another person who's since moved out of this, but it had almost gotten to litigation prior to him moving. And so when you contact Solid Waste Services, they say you need to contact the assembly, right? So they push it off onto the assembly because it's this assembly ordinance. And then when you contact the assembly, nobody really wants to deal with it because, and understandably, the ordinance was put in place so that we could have a clean downtown, right? It makes perfect sense to me. But why, if you're not, I mean, I'm applying that, right? So I don't know why there wouldn't be some sort of a system in place where you can, petition Solid Waste Services, and they would very easily say, oh yeah, you're meeting the intent of the ordinance. Here's your waiver. Nothing like that exists. Again, the way that Solid Waste Services deals with it, which is really frustrating for me because I have a credit score that's above 800, is they wait till the bill gets to be a certain level and then they just funnel it off to collections. There's the individual that I've been talking with for a couple of years now. you know, so it's nice to have the same individual. But, you know, she says, this is my job. This is what I have to do. There's no system within solid waste services to, you know, funnel something up to someone who could sit down and say, yeah, this doesn't make sense. You know, so again, it's been 4 years and it's been being sent to collections twice, which is really, you know, for an individual who's not doing anything wrong, it's a frustrating position to be in. Really, really is. And I can tell you that for sure it needs to be changed, but it's the way that it's approached through solid waste services, which is probably the most, they're very aggressive, you know, and that's unfortunate because it's something that really could have an easy solution. So.
Thank you.
I think, Mr. Colis, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. O'Hara, I'm sorry you're going through this. Normally, audience participation, we don't answer questions and try to solve problems, but certainly willing to try to do that. I would suggest that if you're willing, give me your contact information after the meeting, and we'll follow up with, we have the acting director of solid waste services in the room. I'll follow up with him later. I don't want to put them on the spot right now. I think that they're probably being guided by the letter of the ordinance, and we don't typically have the ability to change the law without the assistance of the assembly, but certainly willing to take a closer look at it. And if there's recommendations that we need to make to the assembly, we can do that.
Yeah, then that's all I have. I do appreciate, I'll get you my contact information. And again, because I know it's not just me that's affected by this 100%. And because it's been in place since I think the ordinance was somewhere in the 70s, for sure this has came up before. So there's probably a solution that's buried somewhere there.
All right, thank you. And we have just a few minutes left, so I just want to see, is there anyone else here for audience participation? Going once, going twice? No, if not, then we are adjourned.